Hey, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder. We are back again for another dope sauce, dopity Infinity Kingdom video. Today, I want to touch on an extremely, and I know I say this every time, well, not every time, a lot of times. This is another big topic. And what I want to cover today is the shot caller versus the council. And we're also going to add in maybe one or two other kind of asterisks, governmental bodies or management like bodies that you can run in a server. But these two are by far going to be the most widely used. Before we get started, as always, make sure you guys sub to the channel, thumbs up, and of course, ring that notification bell to get updates on when new content comes out. Okay. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because I have been seeing a little bit of a debate, at times, sporadically here and there throughout the official IK Discord on some of the channels, where you kind of will have people talk about, how either their server is managed or how it runs, and, what are some of the pros and cons to running different styles of systems. Now, let me go over, because I've ran it both ways. I've actually ran it multiple ways, right? I've been in a server where, I was just an equal part of a council as another lead. I've been in a server where you had, one seat per active top alliance in council. I've been in a server where you've had 2 and 3 active seats per council. I've been in a server where they've had a high council, which is kind of like, anywhere from 2 to 3, 2 to 4 people that kind of make final decisions, and they have kind of a lower council, which is more of a wider representation of leadership. That's kind of where you might have the 2 to 3 seats per. Sometimes you'll have the 2 to 3 seats to just be the main council. There won't be a high or a low council. Other servers, you might have one person making all the decisions, without a council, maybe 2 people making all the decisions without a council. And then other times, right, you might just do it where you don't really have a council, even though for the most part it pretty much is. And, you just have everyone just do votes, and you'll just say, the majority person goes. You don't really have any kind of final decision makers, so to speak, right? It's just 100% everything's democratic. And then it's just a matter of how you set that, right? So do you set it where it's 51/49 is the winning? Do you have to have 3/4? Do you have to have 9/10 votes to go in a favor, right? And you can dive more into the details from there. But what I want to talk about today is what are some of those pros and cons when you're in a server or a kingdom, right? When you're playing these types of games, these kingdom builders. So, coming from playing in almost arguably a lot of different types of management systems, let me start off with the benefits that I find, right? Some of the pros and cons that I find with when you're running kind of a standard council system. And again, the variations, like I said here, you can have anywhere from 1 to 2, 1 to 3 people, right? Depending on how deep you want to go. My recommendation, and this mainly comes in from doing a couple different council variations myself, is that I find just having one person that represents the alliance for each of the top alliances. Now, whether that's the leader, and in most cases really should be, or if it is a appointed rep, like an appointed officer who's just, maybe is just more active, they're more social, they are able to communicate with the lead more efficiently than maybe the lead can. I mean, I've seen situations where that happens. It's not all too often, but it can. Ideally, though, right, you'd like to try and have a lead, preferably, where they are going to be the ones who are active and they're able to kind of represent that seat. So you have 1 seat per however many active alliances you have, and then those people will basically discuss, have conversations, and then make decisions right when necessary. And that could be for any topics, upcoming events, if you're trying to decide what you guys are going to do for COL, for COR, etc. Now, some of the challenges here, right? Now, the pros are that everyone's included, right? Everyone kind of has an equal voice. Everyone has a decision that accounts for themselves, right, as a point if you want to kind of give it somewhat of a numerical value. But everyone has an equal say, an equal voice, and an equal shot at discussion, right? Now the great thing about that is because it does include everyone, you are also going to have discussions that everyone is going to have, or a voice that everyone's going to have as well. And because of that, some things at times may take longer to get done, right? It may take longer to get to a consensus, to a majority, also depending on what kind of restrictions or limitations or handicaps you put on it. But in short, right, you will have a body of people, and like I said, they'll discuss, they'll talk, they'll cast their vote, and then for the most part, majority wins. Right, there's that age-old saying, like kind of like too many cooks in the kitchen, and even though I don't necessarily think that in most council systems that really applies, I think most council systems, especially if they come in an organized way, where, again, right, if you kind of have like a predetermined group that already kind of knows where they're going, it makes those things easier, right? And that's kind of where you kind of get into it. It's like you're either going to come in with an organized group and you're going to have, some of those set council seats already ready to go, or you're going to go into a server, there's no, multi-alliance group or family where it's two or more that's coming in. It's kind of every individual alliance for themselves, and then you're forming your governing body. The challenge there is that everyone might think a different way, and there's no guarantee that anyone is. So you can run into more difficulties and more challenges that way as well, and I don't want to dive too far into that because I might make a separate video on it, but just know that there are a lot of realistic expectations that have to be assumed when you are forming, right, this type of a governing body. Now on the other side of it, you can have it simple. You could have one person that makes the calls, or sometimes one alliance, where they'll make the final decision on what things are going to be done, the direction that we're going, the direction that the group or the server is going in, and then their word is kind of, final say at that point. You could do variations of that, where, and this is kind of similarly to how we do it in 79, that I essentially kind of have evolved from starting off in a council system and just basically later realizing that, a council system is great if there isn't a clear leader, right? If there isn't a clear direction and faith and trust that can be put in one person to make those calls that are respected and valued by a group of alliances in that server. And so for us, right, the way we have ours set up is we have it where, like, I myself will make the final call if and when necessary. But the benefit is that because in 79, right, we had 4 of our leads that came and basically ran it back again with me for this third project, we had an opportunity to really get to know each other a lot in the first project, learn what everyone really brought to the table, what everyone offered. And probably the single best thing I can say is that when you really find a good group of people, a great team of people that you can surround yourself with, as I have, it makes things so much easier when you can find people that are on the same wavelength, that are where they believe in a lot of the similar things that you do when it comes to like short-term and long-term goals for how a server is going to play out. That is by far the most important thing, and I can't say how much I lucked out on that as well. And then there's going to be situations where you can do things like that. I find ours works well, where most of our conversations usually will start off in council, outside of the ones that have kind of already just been predetermined, because we've just laid out a lot of things ahead of time. It makes things so much easier. We don't, in our situation, we're able to minimize a lot of the discussion time because a lot of these things have already been discussed ahead of time. Like, even when we were in our jump preparation phase, right, we would talk about a lot of these important things. And so, as far as policies, how we wanted to manage certain events, so that way, before we even stepped foot into the final server, right, all of these things were pretty much already hammered out. So there was nothing we really had to sit here and discuss or debate or find out who felt one way or the other, get into arguments or have that potentially lead to negative after effects. Nothing. And that, I think, is one of the great things that doing something like a big jumper project can really help, or even just a big project in general. And so I think when you compare doing, and trust me when I say this, I'm not saying to go one way or the other. The way that we operate, giving you an example of one way to manage, may not be the way that will be best for your server or your kingdom, right? There has to be some level of adaptability that is going to favor the people in your server and the type of system that you want to implement. In addition, trust me when I say it is very difficult to implement a system where you have one person that is kind of the overseer, if you will, right? Like the person who's really going to be trusted to have that final decision and to make those calls if and when necessary. As I said, you really have to have, the trust, the belief, and the loyalty to an extent, right, that people give you, right, as an equal share in what you're doing. Right? It's not one way or the other way, right? If you're someone who's going to make that decision, that's because you have been given the opportunity of trust amongst your peers, or better yet, coworkers in this case, right? That say, you know what? If this person makes a decision, I fully back it. I know they wouldn't do us wrong or anything like that. That's why it really comes down to where having that good understanding of one, the type of server you're in. Do you have people that feel a similar way that you do? Do you not? Okay, maybe you need to go with a more democratic system like a council. Are you just going to impede your will and have it be where one alliance or two alliances kind of run the server and what they say goes? I mean, again, like I said, there's a couple different ways that different servers and kingdoms can manage. You just need to be able to figure out what is in the best interest for your kingdom and for your server, especially if you are people that are at the top, right? If you're the number 1, number 2, number 3 alliance, right? Depending on, right, are you a group? Are you not a group? Like I said, are you individual alliances that all just kind of ended up in that server, right? With no 2 or more alliance groups or multi groups in this case. And then what I would say is beyond that, right? Communication is so important. Having a conversation with other leads to ask them, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Because most of the time, the majority of servers are not going to be, multi-alliance groups that are joining them. It's going to be individual leaders. And it's going to be important to have a lot of those conversations. And the earlier you can have those conversations, the better. Because that'll give you a better gauge on what type of system you may run. And maybe it's a modified system. Maybe it's something different that just works for your server, your kingdom, right? Anything for the most part is fine as long as it works. But but again, the conversation has to start, right? It always has to start with a discussion. And that comes from reaching out and communicating, not just letting things idly go by. With all of that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversational topic on whether or not you find it's better to maybe kind of have the shot caller versus the council, anything in between or different, right? Let me know what you do. If you're in a server, what system do you implement? What are some of the pros and cons that you find about your current system, right? And then let me know just what you think as far as how it's going, right? I would love to hear from you, the community. If you're in there and you understand what type of a system your server is running, let me know how you think it's going. What are some of the pros and cons you feel that comes with it? All of that and more in those comments below. That is it for me. Until next time, we will catch y'all later.